What's worse than death? That question sounds impossible to answer. Death is the end of everything, the final punishment, the ultimate price for any crime. At least, that's what most cultures have always believed. But the ancient Greeks believed something far darker. They believed some crimes were so severe, death would have been a mercy. Instead, the gods invented something worse. Eternity. Not eternal rest. Eternal suffering, looped forever, with no end, no escape, and no hope of it ever stopping. Today, we're going to look at 5 men who committed crimes against the gods themselves, and the punishments they received were so creative, so precisely designed to match their sin, that their names became permanent words in our language. You've used these words before, probably without even knowing where they came from. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why one of these punishments is considered the cruelest thing the gods ever created, worse even than being eaten alive. Let's start with the one who suffered for the sake of humanity itself. Prometheus. Prometheus was a titan, not a god, one of the old generation that ruled before Zeus seized power. But when the war between the Titans and the Olympians ended, Prometheus chose the winning side. He helped Zeus. And for a while, that loyalty was rewarded. Prometheus was given a task, to shape mankind out of clay, and he grew to love his creation like a father loves a child. There was just one problem. Humanity was cold, weak, and helpless in the dark, while the gods on Olympus enjoyed warmth, light, and comfort. Zeus had explicitly forbidden any god from giving fire to mortals. Fire meant power. Fire meant progress. Fire meant humanity could eventually become dangerous, even to the gods themselves. Prometheus didn't care about the risk. He snuck into Olympus, stole a single ember of divine fire, hid it inside a hollow fennel stalk, and carried it down to earth. Humanity finally had warmth. Cooked food. Light in the darkness. The beginning of civilization itself. Zeus was furious. Not just at the theft, but at the betrayal. Prometheus had chosen mortals over gods, forever. The punishment Zeus designed wasn't quick. It wasn't merciful. Prometheus was dragged to the Caucasus Mountains and chained to solid rock, his arms stretched wide, unable to move, unable to defend himself. Then, an enormous eagle arrived. Every single day, it landed on his exposed body and tore open his stomach, eating his liver alive while he screamed. Here's the detail that makes this punishment uniquely horrifying. Because Prometheus was immortal, his liver regenerated completely every night. And every morning, the eagle returned, and the agony began again. Not once. Not for 100 years. For an eternity, with absolutely no end in sight, until Hercules finally freed him thousands of years later. Prometheus's crime was compassion. His punishment was eternal physical agony, repeated endlessly, because he dared to give humanity something the gods wanted to keep for themselves. If you think that's the cruelest punishment on this list, wait until you hear what happened to a king who thought he was clever enough to outsmart death itself. We're talking about Sisyphus, the founder and king of Corinth, a man legendary for being the most cunning mortal who ever lived. Sisyphus wasn't punished for stealing fire or defying a single god. He was punished for something far more personal, arrogance toward death itself. When Thanatos, the god of death, arrived to chain Sisyphus and drag him to the underworld, Sisyphus tricked him. He asked Thanatos to demonstrate how the chains worked, and the moment Thanatos put them on himself to show him, Sisyphus locked him in place. With death itself imprisoned, no human anywhere in the world could die. Wars stopped mattering. Sacrifices to the gods stopped happening, because nothing could complete the cycle of life anymore. Ars, the god of war, was the one who finally freed Thanatos, furious that battles had become meaningless without death as a consequence. But Sisyphus wasn't finished testing fate. Before he died, he instructed his wife not to perform his funeral rites, leaving his body unburied. When he arrived in the underworld, he complained to Hades and Persephone that his wife had disrespected him, and he begged for permission to return to the surface briefly to punish her. Hades, moved by what seemed like genuine grief, allowed it. Sisyphus never went back. He lived out the rest of his natural life on earth, laughing at the gods who had shown him mercy twice. When death finally caught him for good, Hades was done being merciful. The punishment was specific, deliberate, and endless. Sisyphus was forced to push an enormous boulder up a steep hill. Every single time he got close to the top, exhausted, muscles burning, the boulder would slip from his grip and roll all the way back down to the bottom. And he had to start again. Forever. Not once. Not 100 times. Forever, with no possibility of finishing, no moment of completion, no final push that actually succeeds. This is where the word Sisyphean comes from, used today to describe any task that is endless, pointless, and impossible to complete no matter how much effort you put in. Now let's talk about a punishment even more psychologically cruel than Sisyphus's endless labor. This one belongs to Tantalus. Tantalus was a son of Zeus himself, a king trusted enough to dine at the table of the gods on Mount Olympus. But that trust bred something dangerous: contempt. Tantalus began to believe the gods weren't truly all-knowing, and he decided to test them, in the most horrifying way imaginable. He invited the gods to a banquet at his own palace. And to test whether they could truly see everything, he murdered his own son, Pelops, cooked the body, and served it as the main course. Most of the gods immediately recognized the horror on their plates and refused to touch it, disgusted and enraged. Only Demeter, still consumed with grief over her missing daughter Persephone, absent-mindedly took a bite from the shoulder before anyone stopped her. The gods restored Pelops to life, replacing his missing shoulder with one carved from ivory. But Tantalus's punishment for this act of unthinkable cruelty had to match the scale of his crime. He was placed in the underworld, standing in a pool of crystal-clear water that reached up to his chin. Directly above him hung branches heavy with ripe, perfect fruit. He was starving. He was desperately thirsty. And both relief and torment were within inches of his face. Every time he bent down to drink, the water receded before his lips could touch it. Every time he reached up to grab the fruit, the branches lifted just out of his fingertips. Forever hungry. Forever thirsty. Surrounded by exactly what he needed, and never once allowed to have it. This is where the word tantalizing comes from, describing something so close, so desirable, and permanently unreachable. We're down to the final two, and these punishments are, without exaggeration, the most disturbing ones on this entire list. Let's talk about Ixion. Ixion was a mortal king guilty of an earlier, unrelated crime, the murder of his own father-in-law, making him the very first mortal murderer in Greek mythology. Most gods refused to even purify him of this crime. Zeus, showing surprising mercy, not only cleansed him, but invited him to dine on Mount Olympus, an honor almost no mortal had ever received. Ixion repaid that mercy by attempting to seduce Hera, Zeus's own wife, queen of the gods, right there on Olympus itself. Zeus discovered the plot before it happened. Instead of killing Ixion immediately, he decided to test him, and confirm his guilt beyond any doubt. Zeus shaped a cloud into the exact likeness of Hera, a perfect illusion named Nephele, and Ixion, believing it was truly the queen of the gods, slept with her without hesitation, proving his intentions completely. Zeus's punishment for this betrayal was permanent and public. Ixion was bound, hand and foot, to a wheel made entirely of fire, and that wheel was set spinning endlessly across the sky, never stopping, visible for eternity as a warning to anyone who dared betray the hospitality of the gods. He isn't hidden in the depths of the underworld like the others. He burns and spins in plain sight, forever. And now, the final punishment, the one many consider the most disturbing transformation in all of Greek mythology. Lycaon was a king of Arcadia, and much like Tantalus, he decided to test whether Zeus was truly all-knowing. When Zeus visited his kingdom disguised as an ordinary traveler, Lycaon devised the exact same horrifying test. He murdered a child, some versions say his own son, others say a hostage, and served the flesh to Zeus as a meal, waiting to see if a god could be fooled by mortal disguise. Zeus was not fooled. Enraged beyond words, he overturned the table in disgust, and unleashed his fury instantly. He didn't drag Lycaon to the underworld. He didn't chain him to a rock. Instead, right there, in front of witnesses, Zeus transformed Lycaon's body permanently, twisting his limbs, stretching his face into a snout, covering his skin in fur. Lycaon became a wolf. Not for a day. Not for a season. Forever, cursed to live out eternity as the very beast whose brutality he had imitated by serving human flesh at his own table. This myth became so infamous that it directly inspired the word lycanthropy, the origin of every werewolf legend that would follow for thousands of years afterward. So here's what these 5 punishments actually teach us, once you strip away the mythology. Every single one of these men committed a crime that mirrored an abuse of trust. Prometheus betrayed Zeus's authority. Sisyphus betrayed Death's authority. Tantalus and Lycaon betrayed the god's hospitality. Ixion betrayed the one god who had shown him mercy. And in every single case, the punishment wasn't simply pain. It was pain, designed specifically to reflect the exact nature of their crime, repeated for eternity, so that the punishment itself became the permanent, unforgettable lesson. Maybe that's why these 5 stories have survived for thousands of years, longer than almost any other myths from ancient Greece. Because somewhere inside all of us, we recognize a small piece of that fear. The fear of being trapped in something that never ends. A job that feels Sisyphean. A goal that feels tantalizingly out of reach. A mistake that follows us permanently, the way Lycaon's curse followed him into every future night. The ancient Greeks weren't just telling stories about gods punishing mortals. They were warning us about what happens when arrogance convinces us we're above the natural order of things. Which of these 5 punishments do you find the most disturbing? Tell me in the comments, and if you made it this far into the video, you already know exactly which one haunted you the most.